There's been a lot of talk of Corey Graves this week as someone who, has been obviously an announcer for WWE for the last decade plus, having to retire from the ring. They transitioned him immediately to a commentator role back in late 2014 for the NXT brand, where he stayed for a couple years. They promoted him to the main roster in 2016, where he's been ever since, and he's been a staple of the Raw and SmackDown commentary teams. PLEs. He's made occasional returns to NXT. He's been pretty much, I don't want to say the face of the commentary team, or the voice rather. That's really Michael Cole. He's essentially the voice of WWE. But their go-to color commentator has been Corey Graves. And that was kind of put into question this past week when he made these series of questionable tweets about being frustrated. And it all started last week on NXT on the New Year's Evil show when I didn't really put much stock into it or notice it myself. But when they introduced Corey Graves as a member of the NXT announce team, he didn't seem overly thrilled, okay? And then people were like, oh, he must not be happy. And, people read too much into things. I don't really go off of, oh, like he looked unhappy. That could have been anything. He's also a heel commentator, so who knows? And then the report came out that he was only on NXT temporarily, or was supposed to be, was going to be, whatever, during the football season. And as it turned out, he was not on NXT this week. He made a comment or a tweet right after Raw went off the air that he has actually since deleted, to the extent of, it kind of hurts being replaced by someone more famous and having a passion for this, blah, blah, blah. Reportedly, per either Fightful or PW Insider, I forget the exact source, but two very credible sources, they had reported that he's been unhappy for a while, and then there might be some internal heat, rather, on Corey Graves for some of the comments he made on social media. And Corey's been largely, by and large, very professional with WWE and not making comments and whatever. He doesn't really have a history of doing this sort of stuff. Beyond the stuff that he tweeted about Punk and them used to being friends, they used to be friends and then they weren't friends, and then Punk went to UFC and he fucking dumped him or whatever it was. He sounded like a jilted ex-lover, like Seth Rollins does on Raw, actually, in his feud at CM Punk. Beyond that, and that was years ago, he doesn't really have a history of doing this sort of stuff. So that kind of came out of nowhere, made me think it was a work. Apparently not, because he made a comment the next day saying, you'll hear from me tonight on NXT, and then sure enough, lo and behold, he was not on NXT. He was not flown in, or not flown in. I mean, it's in fucking Orlando. I think he probably lives around there with Carmella. And he wasn't on the show, and we really haven't heard much about him since. And like I said, there's been internal reports that he's been unhappy for a while. So I know I mentioned a lot there, Mr. Marceau, but what's your immediate reaction to the Corey Graves news? And I guess my first and foremost question is, work or shoot?
I mean, it's like a weird situation, I guess, is the best way to put it. Like, I think he's great and all, and then he's coming out saying, oh, I'm not going to be on Raw, obviously with McAfee back.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was up to me. I mean, I prefer him more than Wade Barrett, so not that I would say, Wade, you're SOL, but I think Corey does have a spot on the main roster. I think him and Tessitore, I think, would be pretty good together, and like I said, I like him more than Wade, but, I mean, I guess my one thing with, celebrities, anyone, I don't understand the whole, tweet and then delete tweet. Like, whatever you say is going to be under a microscope.
Yep.
So why say it if you're going to have to retract it 2 or 3 days later? You just kind of sound like an idiot. But
yeah, that's what surprised me, yeah.
I definitely get his situation and frustration. I mean, he's been with the company. It's kind of like Rollins or, the full-time people upset with, the part-time people. Yeah, they're more popular. They're there all the time. But at the end of the day, the more popular person is going to get the run or the championship. It's like with Brock. People complain oh, Brock's not there, but X, Y, and Z is there every show. But guess what? He's top billing every time. It's kind of the same thing with McAfee. Yeah, Corey Graves is great and all, but McAfee is the bigger name. He has the podcast. He has the reach. They're going to go with him over Corey, unfortunately. But, that's kind of in any line of work that, unfortunately, the person that busts their ass doesn't always get top billing.
Yeah, I can't say I'm too surprised that whenever Pat McAfee comes back that he gets the center stage. Like you said, he gets top billing in the Raw commentary team. What I guess made me think it was a work, at this point I don't really think so. Unless they're really going deep into this, and Ahmed mentioned in the chat that Corey lives in Pittsburgh. I guess they both live in Pittsburgh. I should probably know that because they did that whole mini Total Divas-esque reality show with Corey Graves and Carmella a few years ago. They probably established on that show that they live in Pittsburgh now. I think they did, actually, so I totally forgot about that. And then he wasn't on NXT. I think he was at the Orlando airport. He probably flew in for NXT, then they told him to go home, probably. I don't know. We might not be seeing him on TV for a while. I don't know if they're going to let him go. But yeah, the making the unprofessional comments thing. Obviously he can vent frustration, which is essentially what he was doing. But the way in which he worded it, especially in a business where everyone thinks everything is a storyline, I think there was a reason to think that if it's not already a storyline, that it could be turned into one. I mean, I also thought it was weird, not just based on what he said, excuse me, but not only what he, geez, not only what he said, rather, but the fact that WWE themselves then proceeded to put him on NXT. Why, Mr. Marceau, if this wasn't a storyline, which they have done this many, many times before, why not just put him on Raw or SmackDown and make it a three-man booth? I'm not saying we want three-man booths, but they were going to make NXT into two-man, or rather a three-man booth with Vic Joseph, Booker T, and Corey Graves. Why not just put him on SmackDown with Joe Tessitore and Wade Barrett, who are now currently covering SmackDown? That didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, unless they're really just going in the direction they only want two-man booth. I mean, I feel like sometimes the third-man booth, depending on who it was, could seem like a little overclawed. So maybe they were trying to go with a traditional, like, sports. There's usually only two people in the booth. I mean, occasionally you have, like, the official in the booth, or, I mean, they usually maybe have, like, an expert. But normally I would say most sport broadcasts, it is two people. So besides that, like I said, it still, I mean, I guess it could be a work, but, I mean, I would lean that it's not.
I mean, at least at this point, I would lean toward it not being a work, because I figured if it was, I mean, if it has been a work the entire time, they're doing a really good job of making it seem like it's not a work. And also, why now put him in the ring? He's been cleared for years now. Why now in 2025? And I wouldn't be complaining. I've been calling for a Corey Graves Rumble appearance, Rumble return for the last couple of years since we found out he was cleared back in 2022 or whatever it was. It's been a couple of years. And he hasn't even gotten physical. He hasn't had a one-off. And he was never like the biggest star. Like, this isn't a Big E situation where he's a former world champion, main roster talent. Corey Graves has not wrestled a match in WWE, or really at all to my knowledge, since 2014, since the spring of 2014, 11 years ago. And even if he were to return tomorrow to active competition, he would not be a world champion caliber competitor. And also, not only that, I would love to see this personally, but I think a Corey Graves-Pat McAfee feud would be cool. I just don't think it's realistic to assume that that would even be a WrestleMania match. With all the spots, or the finite amount of spots that they have, even with 2 nights, I don't think they would be making room on a WrestleMania card for 2 guys that are not on the active roster, and it's really just a commentator feud. Like, I could have seen that when they were doing the Raw versus SmackDown thing at Survivor Series, or maybe even at SummerSlam. But at WrestleMania, even now with it being 2 nights, I just don't see them going in that direction. Although it would be cool. Would you have any interest in a Pat McAfee Corey Graves matchup?
I mean, it's interesting. I think, like, with McAfee, his reach is so far that I think, like, it's not out of the question. Like, obviously we didn't want to see, like, Michael Cole and Lawler at the time, but I think with McAfee and the reach he does have, I think there is more of a chance they do him and Graves, just because he has such a huge audience that with 2 nights, I feel like you could put that on there. And, I mean, I guess it would suck for the main competitors, but, I mean, like I said, McAfee's so big, I feel like you could make it work.
Yeah, I definitely think it's something that could work. I feel like the match, I don't know, I mean, like I said, Corey Graves hasn't wrestled in 11 years, but the guy's an experienced veteran, so to speak, and I feel like it could be something that could work. I've been looking forward to something like that for years. And they've always teased tension between the two on television. I never really thought that was legit, and I don't think it was, up until now anyway. I don't know if he has a personal beef with Pat McAfee. It was just weird that he would make a comment like that, because honestly, even if Pat McAfee was around right now, really the person, if you think about it, because Pat McAfee's been in the company for years, and Corey Graves would always be on the opposite show. Unless they were on PLEs together, then they would be on the commentary team together. But it wasn't really Pat McAfee that took his job. It was Joe Tessitore. And it was weird. I mean, I guess Joe Tessitore is obviously more famous than Corey Graves. But I think everyone heard what he had to say, what Corey Graves tweeted, and they automatically assumed it was Pat McAfee. But I mean, there's a chance that he could have been talking about Joe Tessitore too, or both of them. And it's not like Corey Graves is feuding with Joe Tessitore. So I thought it was a weird comment to make.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be Tessitore, but I mean, he is like more play-by-play. It wasn't like, it's not like Corey Graves was really doing play-by-play. He was more like the color commentator. So I would assume it was McAfee. But I mean, I guess you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Or it could
I guess
be
we'll
both.
find out.
Like I said, it could be both. I mean, they both are outsiders, ESPN, kind of, like I said, on more of a national level than he was before.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Hey, triple threat at WrestleMania, Joe Tessitore getting invited. Hey, special guest referee Joe Tessitore as special guest ref versus Pat McAfee versus Corey Graves. Hashtag book it.
Sounds terrible.
Daniel in the chat said, yeah, he was seen at the airport hours before headed back to Pittsburgh. That's when that was before the reports came out. I think that's when they started. Yeah, that's what we were talking about, I believe. Fernando actually mentioned in the chat, Corey Graves is working all of us, and he said Pat McAfee is lame. So he's got a bold opinion on that one. Ahmed had mentioned, I think him, Joe, and Wade would fit perfectly. Listen, I'm not a three-man booth fan, but if they were to make it a three-man booth, I mean, it's better than not using Corey Graves at all. And it's better than putting Corey Graves on NXT, which would absolutely be a demotion. I think he would be much better off in a three-man booth, which they've done before. They had a three-man booth when fucking, what's his name? Honestly, Kevin Patrick was there like a year or two ago. There was a three-man booth at that point, so I don't really see why this would be any different. No, Richie, we're not doing a 3-hour stream, but I appreciate the support. And someone else said Pat McAfee versus Corey Graves. D. I don't know if they wanted to see it. I don't know what that chat was supposed to mean. But hey, listen, like I said, if it's not a work already, which at this point I don't think it is it something they could turn into a work? Yes. Is it realistic to assume they could give them a spot at WrestleMania? No. I mean, they could. I just honestly don't really see that happening personally, but I guess we'll find out in due time. If he's not around for a while, then now you know why. Could he show up in the Rumble, perhaps? Maybe, but like I said, I don't know. Honestly, I don't even know if I don't know if enough people follow the Corey Graves drama and whatnot for that to be a big deal in the Rumble. They might as well just, like, people might not give a shit in Indianapolis. I don't know how many people are actually following this whole Corey Graves drama thing, and if it's just something that, like, us fans are talking about online, and most people don't really even give a shit. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, it's in Indianapolis. That's where McAfee's from.
True.
Corey Graves comes out, like, maybe gets thrown on the Rumble, and McAfee, like, teases him, and then he just jumps the table and just beats the shit out of him. I mean, that'd get heat right away. He's in McAfee's hometown.
Well, now because you said that, I forgot they were in Pat McAfee's hometown. Now I actually want to see that, and I'm going to be disappointed when it doesn't happen, Mr. Marceau. That's what happens when you throw situations out there like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a possibility with it being in Indianapolis. He could, like, turn, like I said, this work into something.
Yeah, no, I agree. You could totally turn it into something for the show. Daniel also mentioned Pat was kind of annoying me on Monday, made me miss Corey, LOL. Yeah, Pat is very over the top. Are you one of those fans, Mr. Marceau, that has turned on Pat McAfee? I still enjoy his enthusiasm. He can be a lot, he can be a lot sometimes. He can be very much. But, I think overall, I think he does a good job. He obviously has a passion for it, and I would take that energy over the likes of Adnan Virk, and I like Kevin Patrick, no disrespect to him, but as a commentator, he wasn't really cut out for that specifically, at least in WWE. But I'll take Pat McAfee over guys like that any day of the week. So what's your current assessment of Pat McAfee's commentary on Monday nights?
Yeah, I like McAfee. I mean, I don't think he, like you said, I think he can be a little dramatic at certain points, but, I mean, there's certain calls that I like. I mean, whenever Sheamus comes out, I love the fight night, baby. I mean, it gets me going every time. When he's eating all over himself for Jay, I think, like I said, some of it's a little much, but I think he does more positive than negative. So, I mean, to me, that's my thought at least.
Yeah, no, I agree. Hopefully they can, channel this and turn it into a positive. I'm not optimistic they will, but I still enjoy Pat McAfee's commentary as well. The eating stuff can be a little much, but personally, I'm never annoyed by it. I have not been annoyed by it, but that's just me personally. I know a lot of other people don't feel the same way, but like I said, it's better than what we used to get from announcers back in the day. If it turns into JBL 2.0 from the Authority era, when you're fucking shitting all over, the baby faces and just acting annoying. If Vince McMahon was back in Pat McAfee's ear, it might be a different story. But, currently I don't really think it's that much of an issue. They just let him go out there and, do his own thing. And, Ahmed said in the chat, him doing the yeet thing is a bit too much. I mean, hey, it is what it is. I enjoy it personally. Mr. Marceau said the same thing. So I get it. It may not be your cup of tea. That's totally fine. But it does hype up the crowd. I'll give you that much.